At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES. Only on Super NES. You're listening to the SNES Podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, folks. I'm Greg, joined by always my favorite co-host, Joe.
Hello.
We are covering, in this episode of the Super NES Podcast, episode number 196, we're looking at a fan suggestion. This was suggested by somebody who's a fan of the podcast. Said it was a very obscure Japanese-only game, so it's like, I figured, Joe, I think, is more into those than I am, but still, it sounded interesting enough. So, we're looking at this episode then at their suggestion. Thank you very much. A Japanese-only racing game, which is called a Uchu Race Astro Go. Literally translated as Super Race Astro Go. Which came out only in Japan in 1994 for the system. So, So I mentioned before in the podcast, in the past, I enjoy some racing games. It's like I think racing games are fun more two-player mode or cooperative mode than they are single player. But having said that, I am a big fan. I am a big fan like the F-Zero series, which apparently the developers of this game also were a fan of F-Zero, which we'll talk about here for obvious reasons shortly. But Joe, had you ever heard of this game or knew anything about it before you started playing it?
No, I had never heard of this game. I have never seen this game. And when you mentioned it, I was like, what is that? Of course, Google helped me out and helped me discover it. The first thing I saw was like, oh, okay, I might like this game.
Yes. It is very similar to F-Zero. There definitely are similarities to this game, but there's also some significant differences to cover, which we'll get into in just a moment. So, the game was developed and published by companies we've already covered here in the podcast. Actually, the game was developed by K's Corporate Limited, which is a mostly Japanese company. They also branch out. They've been around since 1987. They also branched out into doing pachinko games, pinball, websites, IT work, etc. So not just video games that they've made. Most of their games have stayed in Japan, but there are a few games that come over here in the West. One of the games we've already covered on the podcast before, Super Pinball Behind the Mask, which is probably the most obscure Nintendo published game for the system, because it's a very niche game. Pinball is, of course, kind of niche. So they also developed the cult favorite Zombie Nation for the NES in 1990. Did you ever play that game, Joe?
I did not.
Yeah, Zombie Nation's fun. That's a very that's a more obscure game, but that sounds like one of theirs. So they also published they also developed, curiously enough, a Shin Megami Tensei pinball spin-off game. So
okay. You don't get any more obscure Japanese than that, right there.
Well, it actually, I can't see at first glance if it came out in North America. It was published by Atlas, so may have come out in North America. I'll have to look later. But anyway, most companies' games they develop have either been racing games or pinball games. That seems to be their bread and butter. So they also developed the terrible Ultraman game at the Super NES as well too. So wait, no, I'm sorry, not that one. They the 2004 game, which I've not played. Never mind, track that. So I have no idea. The game was published by Meldac, which is a Japanese music and video game company. They've been around. They've been around since 1990. They used to have a U.S. branch, but that closed. They also they're the ones who published Zombie Nation, 50th Nation North America, and they also had the publishing rights to Super Pinball Behind the Mask in Japan as well too. Nintendo's the one who got the rights from them to publish the game in North America. So that partnership between the two companies also affected this game as well too, which we'll cover here later on. But anyway, so this game. This game is your pretty basic racing game. You have available to you two modes when you're at the game. You have a time trial, which allows you to practice races. Curiously enough, compared to many other racing games, you're allowed to practice any race you want to, including races you haven't gotten to like normal gameplay, which is cool. So. You have time trial, and you also have the main game racing mode, which also has two selections. There's normal, and there's also power mode. So, from what I could tell, the power mode started you off with some extra power ups and some extra power abilities like you're a racer. Compared to normal racing mode, we have to earn that stuff as you earn stuff as you go through the courses normally. So, there's 15 races altogether available to you. Each one takes place on a different planet. Your objective, like most racing games, is to try to get first or close enough to first to be able to advance. You have to, like in the main game mode, Grand Prix mode, you have 5 chances to get third place or better. If you lose 5 times, the game will give you one more chance to continue using using standings that you earned prior. But keep in mind, those 5 losses in Grand Prix, they count across the entire course. So, for example, if you get your 5th loss in race 10, and then get your 6th loss in race 12, that's it. Game's over. So, the game also saves your progress using a battery backup. So, no need for passwords in this game, which is always nice. Before we talk about similarities and differences between F-Zero, which is obvious comparison like this game for anybody who's seen graphics of the game will understand. Joe, why don't you about gameplay and your own experiences with this?
Oh boy. So well, like I said, I saw screenshots for this game because I hadn't heard of it, and immediately was like, oh cool, I love F-Zero. This is an F-Zero clone. I'm interested to see how this game is. Wow. So, I did not... I felt the controls were kind of tight. I really didn't like the way the controls felt. There's ice patches. There's multiple different obstacles that get in your way. That was one of the things that I found with this game is... it tries to pull itself off as a racing game, like F-Zero, but to me it was more like an obstacle course. You have fans, you got slingshots, you got conveyor belts, bumpers, there's different jumps. When you make jumps, it's not like F-Zero where you just land on the track and you're good. Like, you have to land on specific pattern landings to be able to proceed in the race. Quite a few times I made jumps and I was like, oh cool, land on the track, just to be kind of picked up by the rescue vehicle and placed on the proper pad. That was the other thing that I found interesting in this game. You don't blow up or anything like that. It's like you get rescued every single time. No pivoting camera was very interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because, that's one of the things I loved about F-Zero. With that pivoting camera, you got a sense of the speed that you were going. This game, the only way I feel the sense of speed in which I'm going is when I'm pinballing off of the bumpers and all the other obstacles that are in your way. And pinballing is something that will happen quite a bit in this game when you're racing, especially to begin with. It takes a little while to get used to the controls. 5 pilots to choose from. They all have their varying degrees of, what they're good at and what they're not. So, I appreciated the little bit of variety there. What was the other one that I had issues with? Every other argument I had has to do with, sound design. We'll get into that, too.
Yeah. So I think you hit the major points in the head like right there, because it's like because first glance the game does look like an F-Zero clone, because like obviously the developers were inspired by F-Zero, which is like, okay, that's not a bad game, that's not a bad game to be inspired by, because F-Zero is great. So, but the first thing you notice right away is the fact the camera doesn't change. So which is curious. It's like I can appreciate them doing that, because like, F-Zero I know is unplayable with some people because of motion control sickness like whatnot. So I understand, I get it. But it's like it's interesting. It's interesting how that actually plays in practice, though, because because the camera doesn't move, it makes the courses feel a lot more smaller and compact than they actually are, because they're actually big courses, but because you can't see around you, you don't get to take that in. So as a result, the game feels very narrow and focused because of that, because of that aspect. The graphics themselves are good. The game has the game's like good graphics. Yeah. The planets all have a different look to them. They all have that very space theme that they were going for here with this. The cars themselves are very different. They're very different looks. That's like very cute how one of the cars has those like very long Star Wars python wings that kind of that shake that as the car races. So the cars have some cool design to them, for sure. I love the fact you can't die straight out in this game, like you mentioned, Joe. If you get stuck or run out of energy, whatever, you just get rescued. So I appreciate that. I thought the courses ran a bit long. I thought F-Zero hit the perfect. So I thought F-Zero did the perfect balance of 3 laps. This game requires you 5 laps for each course. Yeah. So it feels a bit longer because of that. The obstacles also are not as interesting in this game as F-Zero is. And, it's not fair to compare this game to F-Zero like this, because it is trying to do its own, because it's trying to be its own game. The problem is that the game is so similar to F-Zero in many ways, you can't help but compare the two of them. So, it's like, I'm just going to say it's not fair that we're doing it to the game, but it is what it is. So, I definitely agree with you. Yes, I definitely agree with you. With pinballing, the track also didn't feel to be as crowded as F-Zero was, because there's not as many racers on the race there with you. So I actually found the game. I actually found the game easier than F-Zero was. Another thing this game lacks that F-Zero doesn't. There's not really any difficulty settings. The only difficult settings you can have is normal versus power mode. Right. So all in all, I thought this game was easier than F-Zero was for the most part. So because F-Zero, I played a lot of to be able to finish that game. All the races, I finally did in the end, but this one, most races didn't. You didn't really pose a challenge. So. And yes, I do agree with the controls. The controls do feel a bit tight, or not as responsive as I would liked. They're not horrible. They they just take but they're not perfect. They just take some getting used to.
Yeah, and that's just it. It takes some getting used to, and most people who are going to pick up and play this game, they're not going to put that much time into it. I think to get used to it, it's going to be, this feels like garbage, and I don't want to play it anymore.
Yeah. You mentioned the music sound a bit ago, Joe. Did you have problems with that?
So, I think the music's fantastic in this game. I really enjoyed the soundtrack. Yeah. But, oh my god, the whining of the engine. I don't know what sound effect they used, but the whining of the engine drove me nuts. I had to not pause the game, but mute the sound, because the constant that's pretty annoying. But other than that, bouncing off the wall sounds as it should when you're jumping, racers going by you if you're doing that bad in the game. Everything else was kind of on par, but that engine sound was enough to make me want to mute it, which is depressing because, like I said, the music that I heard was fantastic. I even tried to look up different tracks on YouTube so I could hear the rest of the soundtrack. Right. And I loved the music that's in this game. But that engine sound, it's like a Genesis dying cat.
So I didn't mind it quite as bad as you did, but yeah, I do agree with you that the engine sounds like pretty horrible. So
Yeah.
Also, wanted to mention about course design. Course design, the race design courses I thought were pretty good for the most part. I do like the fact that they actually have you do jumps, that kind of stuff, because I thought it was fun in games. But you definitely can tell this game. They definitely can tell this game the developers come from pinball heavy background, because a lot of the courses have like pinball elements to them, like bumpers to bounce off of, like, a whatnot. So I liked that. I'm not sure if you did, Joe, but I like that aspect.
I liked it when it worked. So, I mean, thank God you can't die. So that's a plus.
Yep, that's a plus.
Because if this was F-Zero, with all the bouncing off the walls that I did, I would have blown up and there wouldn't have been me completing any course. But here, like, you can kind of, there's specific points in the race, like, especially with, like, the rubber band slingshot, obstacle that they have. I mean, you can use it to your advantage, so it's not really an obstacle, but if you set yourself just right, they are positioned to kind of move you along the course quicker, and be a, what do you call it? An ally more than an adversary. Yeah. But I mean, I'm with you, man. Like, even if I didn't know anything about the developer, and I didn't know they designed pinball games and had done so in the past, looking at this game and playing it, I would have guessed that that's what they did.
Yeah.
Again, I don't hate it.
Yeah.
But it just took some getting used to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is a very different pinball game. I'm sorry, pinball game. Yeah, we're talking.
You're right.
pinball inspired game here, because it's like, and that really. That's the major thing that makes it stand out from F-Zero, because the fact that this game does have that pinball elements to the courses. So I think it's a plus because that makes this game like very unique. I can see why my friend who's just the game likes it so much, because it is a very unique racing game. I can't think of another piece, but I can't think of another racing game like this. The pinball aspects definitely do make it unique. I had the hardest time with the courses that had the sharp 9-degree corners that require you to hit the pinball bumper to be able to bounce off of.
Yes.
That's challenging. So, also, while the game graphically does look very pretty, the 3D graphics, that fixed camera angle, you can't see as far in front of you as you can in F-Zero. So you don't have as much warning as what's coming up to you on the course. In F-Zero, there's more draw distance, so you can see more what's going on. Yeah. Plus, also the fact that F-Zero had a mini map of the race on the screen. This game doesn't. So the combination of both those things means that means that later on in the game you are gonna crash and burn several times until you actually memorize the course well enough to figure out, okay, I have to go here, I have to go there. It's just unfortunate the combination of those two things make this game more harder than it really should be. Yeah. But anyway, so so I do give overall thoughts. You probably already gleaned what we're saying here, what we thought about the game. Overall, I do like this game. I think that, complaints aside, and I do have many complaints in this game. I think overall, this is a very unique, fun racing game. If you're a fan of racing games, and if you're going to put the time in this game requires to get good at it. As Joe alluded to, this is not really pick up and play racing game. You really do have to spend some time practicing the controls, getting used to things, that kind of stuff. So, had F-Zero never come out, this game could be awesome, I think, because it's it definitely would be, in its own category. But because, like I said before, it's unfair, but you can't compare this game to F-Zero, and I just think F-Zero overall is a better designed course. Course is a better designed racing game. Sorry, but anyway, what this game does have going for it, it's a very unique pinball-inspired, maps, and the fact that this game is playable to people who may suffer motion sickness. So, Like, so if you're a big racing fan, if you're a fan of, if you're a fan of obscure Japanese games, I definitely recommend checking this out because this game is rather obscure. I don't, but I was surprised to see how many magazines actually published it. I had actually published reviews of this game back in the day, but nowadays it definitely is an obscure game. So yeah, if you're a big racing gamer who wants a unique game, check this out. Otherwise, if you're a fan of if you're a fan of F-Zero, there's not really like any point in playing this because like the point in playing this because you're already getting the better game like an F-Zero, I think. So, yeah. So yeah, I didn't hate the game. I just think it's fine for what it is. So, Joe, what's your conclusion, overall conclusion like this game?
I say look at this game as DLC for F-Zero. That was fan made, not by Nintendo.
That's interesting.
It's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's, if you got that F-Zero itch, I guess, you could kind of relate and play this game as if it was F-Zero. But, I mean, it's its own thing. It's very bouncy, and you got to keep that in mind.
Right.
And like I said, on numerous times on this podcast, at least play it. You don't have to like it, but you should at least play it. Outside of that, the game's alright. Like, once you get used to it, it's a pretty good game. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree with that definitely. So
I'm currently combing through an issue of Nintendo Power trying to find...
Yes, I was going to mention that. So
yeah, so I was looking for that specific review, and I can't seem to find it, which is disappointing.
It's in the July 94 issue, volume 62.
Yeah, and I'm flipping... oh, here we go. Freeway Flyboys, which was what it was supposed to be named here, but it never got released. It got canceled. So
information... Yeah, yes, I was going to say, information about this is pretty scarce. My best writing theory is, like I mentioned before, Nintendo did a relationship, like the publisher, Meldac, because like I said before, with like another Kazi developed game, Super Pinball Behind the Mask. Meldac published that in Japan, but Nintendo got the rights to publish that game in North America. I think this game was gonna have the same thing happen to it, like where Meldac published the game in Japan, and Nintendo got the rights to publish the game in North America. That's my guess, based upon what I know before it happened in the past.
Right.
Why that never happened, I'm not sure, because apparently, because it was weird. They were planning upon bringing this game over to North America, and then they changed their mind. So I'm guessing probably maybe Nintendo felt the game's too similar to F-Zero. Maybe they were afraid about how it might sell over here. I'm not sure why. There's not...
My best guess would be, based on this review, which I will read here, this review alone probably stopped that game in its tracks to coming over here. So here's how it starts. What would happen if you combined F-Zero with the Care Bears? By 1994, Care Bears are passé and definitely not popular, so this is not a good start. Well, you'd probably get arrested, but what you'd get on the screen might resemble Freeway Flyboys. So where does all the weirdness come from? On the planet Daisy Age, there is an annual race called the Astro Go between 5 top racers. When you join the race, you'll launch into a wild high-speed Mode 7 affair with lots of jumps and the opponents that look like Barney's goofier cousins. You can race the entire circuit or try to set the record in time trials. The plus that they gave it is the racing can be fun, particularly for younger players. The minus was not much challenge, weird themes, and weird characters.
Yeah, I can see most of that. I think this game is, like I said before, this game is definitely easier than F-Zero is. I think this game, that's a good point. This game would be more ideal for like a younger game player, I think, because it's not quite as challenging as F-Zero is. The Care Bear reference, I can kind of see that because this game does kind of have some very like cartoonish elements to it. So
yeah, I mean it's got a lot of pinks and stuff like that.
Sure,
so I see where they're coming from, but also like. I don't know. Like, I just feel like that was your nail in the coffin. Like, it's Nintendo Power. Like, if they were going to publish this thing, you think that they would lie to us like they had in the past. That's all I'm saying.
Actually, Nintendo Power was pretty accurate, like the reviews that I thought. But because they did give some games like bad marks. They didn't they didn't glowingly pass everything off as being great. So, but also by '94, Nintendo Power had also changed. It could be more brutal than they had been before in the past as well too.
Right.
So, there's also that. But that's probably a good point. It's like, I think that probably the reviewer played this game obviously wasn't that impressed by it. So it's like, I think probably the higher fine side not to bother. So
yeah, I mean, as far as Nintendo of America is concerned, like, pretty much they had the say of what would come over and get translated and what wouldn't.
Right.
And it really looks like they got the advanced copy of this, and it just didn't meet the standards that they felt that it needed to hit to be able to be released here.
Yeah. That said also, that said as well, this game's a Japanese game, and racing games of course don't have very much Japanese text in them anyway to begin with, so that wouldn't have been a problem. But
right.
There's not one bit of Japanese in this game. Like, it's all in English. So which was also thought curious, but it also means this game is very emulation friendly if you want to check it out.
Yep.
Because it would have been anyway. The fact the whole game's in English made me think that developers probably did have the North American market in mind all along for this game. But
I agree.
So. The reviews of this game probably also didn't help. The reviews of this game were moderately based when it came out. Most of these are Japanese publications, so I'm not going to bother with the names. I'll just give you the scores. The lowest scores on here were 51% and 55%. So the highest scores were 80 and 81%. So you got moderate scores for the game. Which is what we say. Yeah, which kind of mirrors what we were saying before.
Yeah.
Not horrible, but not great. Just like
right.
a very kind of average racing game with a few wrinkles to it. So, so that probably didn't help either as far as the decision to bring the game over. Anyway, though, there are a bunch of cheat codes you can use in this game, however, which are pretty nice. There appears to be 4 of them altogether that this game has. One of them is course record clear code. If for some reason you want to clear the battery and start over again fresh, you can use this code to clear everything out. One is the replay mode. This allows you to be able to replay a course again after you played it through the first time. After playing it, you have to play it. They put this code in to play it again. There's also a sound test code you can use to hear all the music in the game. And finally, there's also there's also available a stage skip code you can use to skip courses in the game going to the next one. It's pretty useful codes. eBay. This game is probably one of the most rarest games on eBay we've covered so far for the podcast. Which makes sense. It was a Japanese only game. It's a very obscure niche game at that. And it probably did not get a huge printing run. So at the time you're looking at this recently, a couple weeks ago, as of August 2022, there were 11 copies of the game listed online on eBay from all formats from all countries of the world, which we'll cover here in a little bit. But nothing has sold recently in the last 90 days. So the prices. So I know history. So I know history of sold examples to you guys. I can just give you the prices of what they're asking for the copies now, and most of these buy now prices. So I think these are fairly accurate for what you expect to pay for this game if you want to get it. So if you want the card only, there were there were six examples of this being sold from various countries around the world. These prices include shipping. They were asking anywhere. They were asking anywhere from $24 to $82, like for this game, depending upon where it's being shipped from, which is all right pricing, I think. But one CIB copy of this game is available from Japan. They were asking for $81. Repros of this game, if you want to play it, playing a U.S. Super NES system. One copy of this game was being sold from the U.S. in repo format for $55. 3 more copies were being sold from China for anywhere from $26 to $41. So depending upon how much of a rush you were to get the game, will determine upon how much you end up paying for it. But I think those prices are a little high for repos, but they're not like outrageous.
Yeah, but I feel like I would just break off the tabs that I have to break off in the Super Nintendo to be able to play the Japanese Famicom games. You know what I mean? I just get that instead of, a repo in this case. Because with the repros, sometimes they work out because they do English patches and you'll be able to understand the game. You don't need that for this game.
No, you don't.
So you might as well go for the slightly cheaper copy and get it straight from Japan.
Yeah. Anyway, very interesting. The game's not impossible to find on eBay, but it is one of the more obscure games we covered on the podcast for sure. So, for reasons I can understand why. So that's Astro Go. I can see why my friend enjoys the game so much because it is. Because if you're a fan of F-Zero, I definitely can see you really like this game a lot too as well. It does do some different things to help separate it. But like I said before, it's so impossible not to compare the two games because how similar that they are. So, fans of F-Zero, fans of racing games, definitely worth all checking it out. Otherwise, I just think there's better racing games out there, unfortunately. So
agreed.
It would be interesting to see what happened. It'd be interesting to see what happened in this game in an alternate world where F-Zero never came out. I think this game would probably have a very different reputation than it does today.
Yeah, very true.
Anyway, that's the podcast for you. As always, we very much appreciate you giving us a few minutes every day. We have now set up our games coming up in the next several episodes, leading up to our big draft episode or the 200th episode. For our next episode 197, what games do you want us to cover next time, Joe?
Oh, we are going to be covering Street Fighter Alpha 2.
Yes. So we covered the original Street Fighter 2 on this podcast way back when. But I either do not remember playing Alpha 2 or I've never played it. I'm assuming, Joe, there's some big differences between this game like the original Street Fighter.
Well, it's a prequel.
Oh, that's
it's known as Street Fighter 2 in the land down under. So yeah, you still get your typical Street Fighter mainstays with Ryu and Ken, but there's some new fighters that we're introduced to who become prevalent later on in the series and whatever else. So, but yeah, this is I'm excited to talk about this one.
Okay, cool. Well, as always, if you want to give us comments, feedback, suggestions, etc., you can find us on Facebook. Or you can also send me an email directly to the SNES Podcast at yahoo.com. Joe, where can they reach you at?
You can find me on my very public Facebook page, or you can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30.
Yes. So thank you very much. As always, give us a few minutes every day. And just make sure you're not actually just make sure you actually get some time between playing a racing game and actually going out and driving in real life, because otherwise bad things may happen. So just a final wrap up piece of advice of the day. So later all, take care.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man. Now you're playing with power. Pinball power.